Where's that coming from? Greetings, salutations from space. Aloha from Earth. We're gonna find forever. This thing is doubling up. Let me push a couple of secret buttons and track that down. That's called too many windows open at once. All right, well, as I do that, I'm really having a hard time finding this. Let me at least introduce the flow for the day. We are talking about the USA Jupiter Synodic Return, which is an 83-year astronomical realignment. United States is about to celebrate the third synodic return of Jupiter because we're coming into the 249th solar return of the Declaration of Independence. 249 is thrice 83. Now, looking back in history, we find that the first of these 83-year Jupiter Synodic returns aligned in 1859. This is the time of John Brown's body, amongst many other things, and other events that were leading to the U.S. Civil War. And the second United States, or at least Declaration of Independence, Jupiter Synodic Return, aligned in 1942, July 4th, 1942, so shortly after the December 1941 Pearl Harbor attack. And so we're looking at the entrance of the United States into World War II, eventually leading to the bombs, right? So while Jupiter is often taught to be a 12-year cycle, right? You've heard that so many times. Jupiter 1 year in a sign and 12 years around the trip. Truthfully, it's 11.86 years round. And that starts showing itself, that difference between 11.86 years and 12. I mean, even by the time you reach like 48, your fourth 12th, you'll find that the Jupiter return is more around 47 years of age and 35, not 36. And then the big one, as you'll see, and we'll play with slides a bit and kind of explore the Jupiter Synodic cycle, the Sun-Jupiter cycle in general. The big one's at 83 years of age. And so you'll get to see that in a chart. So what is at 84 years is Uranus. Uranus, who takes 84 years to get around Earth's zodiac, and therefore spends about 1/12 of that time, 7 years in each of the signs. So at 84 years, the first Uranus return, twice that, being what, 168 the second, and the third at 252 years. I don't think I'm going to make that one. But things that live longer than a human life, like the United States has, can reach these astronomical landmarks, and they clearly have meaning. So it's hard, I'll just say right now, not to fall into fear when I'm looking at the previous Jupiter Synodic returns and Uranus returns for the United States, given that that's all aligning now, this year of 2025, the Declaration of Independence, celebrating 249, which is thrice 83, so the third Jupiter Synodic return. And then in 2027, that will be the third Uranus return for the United States. So is there any hope that this one might play less dramatically than the previous? I mean, when we turn on the TV, and you probably shouldn't, it's hard to imagine that it's not all falling to hell in a winter. How's that go? Going to hell in a what? But at least I'm enjoying the ride. I don't know. Are you enjoying the ride? But I will say that when we put our eyes to the sky, and especially if we explore the heavens through the legends of other mythic traditions, we might just find that stars are now aligning for a very sacred shift through space and time. And I'd rather put my wish, my hope, my dream, my intentions on that kind of scene, you know? So thanks everybody for the bucket and the handbasket and other things. But maybe we'll also look to the hoop. All right, well, to the pretty pictures, I'll just say you're about to experience a group of slides that are designed to appear towards the end of a long teaching or series of teachings called Is This the Spawning of the Age of Aquarius? Or the Turning of the Ages, or Galactic Alignment, or all of these things. But I want to show you a piece that really helps us see how the streets and temples of Washington, D.C., and a very strange painting on the ceiling of the Capitol building, the building of the House, that building that's meant to represent we the people, and that branch. For me, speaks to the space-time mysteries of our day and age. All right, so we're going to go through some of this images, and then I think there'll be some time for us to explore the 399 Jupiter Synodic Cycle, the Sun-Jupiter cycle, and also perhaps look to the 83-year frequency, the greater frequency of that cycle. So to the charts we go. Let me say before we do, thank you so much for spending some time here at Storytelling Hour with your host and celestial navigator, Gemini Brett, from the School of Earth Astrology. The present of your presence is a great gift. I'd love to see you show up in the comments, whether you are here at a time I currently perceive to be the present, or reporting from the future. Where are you coming from? What's in your heart right now? How you doing? How are you weathering these strange storms? All right, let's dive into this School of Earth Astrology. Is this the spawning of the age of Aquarius? Perhaps. There's this interesting thing you can find in the big book, Mark 14:12. In the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, which you know is a ram, his disciples said unto him, Where wilt thou that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? And he sendeth forth 2 of his disciples, and said unto them, Go ye into the city, and there shall meet you a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him. And he will shew you a large upper room furnished and prepared. There make ready for us. And his disciples went forth and came into the city, and found as he had said unto them, and they made ready the Passover. And in the evening he cometh with the 12. The 12. Now many have long read this passage from the New Testament as a forecast of the age of the water bearer, of the age of Aquarius. Some would say that Christ himself was the avatar for the Piscean age, the one who, coming from the previous age, the age of Aries, or the age of the ram, and transitioning us into the age of the fish, was born the good shepherd and the lamb, and became the fisher king, right? The fisher of men. And we can see that, this fisher king born of the virgin invokes the images of the fishes on one side and the priestess constellation, the Virgo constellation on the other. We can see as well that if we rewind before this birth of Christ, this new birth of a new sun, 2160 years-ish, we see the time of the shift from the age of the bull to the age of the ram, right? And so we have many tales, like if you're familiar with the Inanna story, she marries the shepherd ram, right? Dumuzi. In fact, in the old Babylonian constellations on the path of the moon, this is the proto-zodiac from which the 12 zodiacal constellations were later derived, there was no ram. There was the hired man, or the hireling, some say, and this was the shepherd, right? So the age of the shepherd, or the age of the shepherd kings, some suggest, coming out of this age of the bull. You can see in the Inanna story that Inanna marries Dumuzi, the shepherd. Then she sends her consciousness to the great below and descends, right? And why? Because she feels the grief of her sister Ereshkigal. And why is her sister Ereshkigal grieving? Because Gugalana, her husband, has just died. Well, Gugalana means the bull of heaven, right? So changing from the bull to the shepherd in that story. We can see this in the slaying of the Minotaur by the warrior Theseus. We can see this in Moses, who, coming down from Mount Sinai, having received the 10 commandments, like thou shalt not kill, ends up killing 3,000 of his people with his brother Aaron. Why? Because the first commandment is no false idols, right? And because they were experiencing famine and disease and seeing that they would die in the desert during the Exodus, right? They were practicing some of the traditions from Kemet, from the land we now call Egypt, where they were, right? Like worshiping this golden calf. Well, why a calf and not a bull? Because precession of the equinoxes is a precession. It's a retrograde motion. So we move from the high degree of the sign to the low, right? And what is the first degree of the bull? The calf, right? Just as the first degree of the ram, the lamb. Well, what's the first degree of the fish? Probably the spawning of the age of Aquarius. So I've already shown too many of my cards. Why not show a few more? So when we look back to this passage from the New Testament that speaks of the water bearer and perhaps the coming of the new age, the question would be when. And I believe we get a hint shortly thereafter, like here in Mark 14:61. Now this is Christ on trial, and they are attempting to, and actually succeeding in getting Jesus to blaspheme publicly so they can justify his coming murder, his crucifixion, right? So we hear this, but Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Now, it is my suggestion that that is an astronomical transmission. To see this, we have to first understand that Christ, the Son of Man, is the sun in our sky. The 12 disciples, the 12 signs through which the sun travels each year, or through which the moon travels each month. Interestingly, at the crucifixion, there were 3 Marys, yes? This would be the maiden moon, the mother moon, and the crone, right? So the waxing, full, and the waning moons. So that's too much for some to hear. They're not here anyway, right? But this idea that Christ is the sun in the sky and that the disciples are the signs. Thomas means twins. And actually, Didymus Thomas was the name, right? Well, Didymus means twins in a different language. So this one, Thomas, twins, is the sign you and I call Gemini. And we could go on and on like that. But let's cast our eyes to the sky, glance above to find the sun sitting at the right hand of the mighty one. What would that be? And coming on the clouds of heaven. What would the clouds of heaven be? Well, anyone who's gone away from the city lights, probably when they first saw the Milky Way band, thought these were strange clouds in the heavens. In the right hand of the mighty one. Probably this place that you and I know as Orion's Club. This is the center of the racetrack of the sacred hoop of stars, where an eclipse formed at a time of galactic alignment on June solstice, Cancer solstice, Northstice, 1982, winter solstice in the southern hemisphere where that eclipse was experienced. And so here you see Orion pointing to the ground, doing that handstand. What was that called when you stand on one hand and put the board on your, the ho-ho, right? Wait, maybe that's two hands. Anyway, it's just a hand plant. That's like the southern hemisphere view of this zone of the heavens. Perhaps you haven't been under to see that. All right, but this place was eclipsed in 1982 at the solstice. And again, 19 years later, the Metonic cycle, 19 years later, a solar eclipse again on the hand of the high man, or at this pavement where Orion's doing the hand plant. Again, this was a southern hemisphere solar eclipse, though it was seen in some northern hemisphere locations like in Central Africa. And then 19 years later in 2020, before we go there, let's just flip that around. How was that seen in some of those northern hemisphere locations like this, where Orion reaches his torch up into the heavens. Now, for Orion, the hunter of the Greek myths, who is not really a nice guy, I prefer some of the older images like the true shepherd of Anu, that coming from the Babylonian tradition, where that club would be like the shepherd's crook, or some might see like the crook and the flail held by Osiris, by Asur, because it is said that when Osiris died and went through the Duat, he was later resurrected in the heavens as this constellation of stars that most of us these days know as Orion the Hunter. So I like to see that also as Osiris, the green man, the one who, along with his queen, his sister Isis, brought agriculture and so much of the compassion and teachings of civilization to humanity after the Great Fall. For me, it's just kind of a better image in this space, the true shepherd of Anu, or Osiris, than the hunter who declared he could kill all of Earth's animals and the like. Probably be good for us to make a shift like this. So here we see the son of man, let's say the son of human, sitting at the right hand of the mighty one, Orion, on the clouds of heaven. the Milky Way band. Now, the sun visits that place of the sky since it is on the ecliptic, the heart of the zodiac, the sun's path, every year for always. But it's in our day and age, as you will see, when the solstice sun creates a solar snow cone for Orion, that this is happening at solstice time. And so for northern hemisphere skies, like those of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, etc., Egypt, we're talking about summer solstice, the height of the light, the glory of the king, and other such poetic, mystical names that have come forth. In the Celtic prophetic tradition, this is called the sun on the hand of the high man. And we hear of it in many places, and it's my feeling that it is this that Christ was invoking when he said, "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Now, we see that this eclipse in that place, which I should also add, is one of the two galactic crosses. On the opposite side of the heavens, we find a crossing of the ecliptic, the plane of our solar system, shown here as this yellow band, right? So that's the heart of the zodiac, the path of the sun, and for the most part, that of the planets, because our solar system is relatively flat, right? There are two places where that ecliptic plane, the zodiac, the sun's path, intersects the Milky Way band. Right? So this is the galactic plane, the galactic equator. Now, truthfully, when we get outside, every star we see is in the Milky Way galaxy. You can learn to see the Andromeda galaxy, which is not, right? Like that's our nearest galaxy to us. It's a very cool thing to initiate yourself into being able to see our galactic neighbor, right? Another group of billions of stars and all that, right? But every other dot in the sky that you see is either a planet, a wandering star traveling through the so-called fixed stars and constellations, which are all formed of stars within the Milky Way, right? I mean, as we see even Milky Way nebula with our naked eyes, like that amazing birthplace of star that is found in Osiris's golden phallus. Orion's sword beneath the belt stars of Orion. And I could go on and on and on. And I will, in a sacred astronomy spawning of the age of Aquarius series of cosmic key courses that is currently under creative construction, but it's going to be a little while before it sees the light of day. Anyway, importantly, there are two places where the plane of our solar system, the ecliptic, the path of the sun, the heart of the zodiac, and the galactic plane, right? So the Milky Way band, right? Like that's the plane of our spiral galaxy as it's taught by astronomers these days, right? There's two places where they intersect, and one is on the opposite side of where we're looking here, which is near the galactic center, where the Milky Way bulge, where the Ouroboros, the cosmic serpent, bites its own tails. Right? You search Milky Way online, that's what you're going to see. This is the opposite side. In the Milky Way band, the clouds of heaven are not nearly as pronounced on this side of the heavens, because here we have our back to galactic center, and we're looking out towards galactic anti-center. We'll see that labeled in some images that we will arrive to along the way of our journey. My first teacher, Daniel Gemario, of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, who turned me on to a lot of this stuff. Parts of the things that I'm adding are like the directional nature of the tropical zodiac, and also translating this passage from the Bible to add to many of the prophetic mysteries that I first was initiated into or introduced to, I guess in a more common expression, by Daniel Gemario, and also by John Major Jenkins, the late, and I say great John Major Jenkins, in his books Maya Cosmogenesis and his follow-up text that I feel every star student should read, which is called Galactic Alignment, right? So much of what I know about this, what I will share to be the most powerful astronomical and therefore astrological alignment of our day and age, comes from the work of Daniel and John Major Jenkins. And yeah, just wanted to give credit where credit is due. But when we start to learn to see some of these sacred spaces in the sky, we might hear them in the writings of the Bible, and I do. And we might see them on the dome of the United States Capitol, and I do. So let's go there. Before we do, let's just ask ourselves if there was any significant event in the year of 2001 that might call this June 21st, 2001 solar eclipse its prenatal syzygy or prenatal eclipse. And of course, yes, right? The world is still reeling from that tower event in September of 2001. Here we see the Statue of Liberty with these twins nearby, these twin towers. You see something similar to that in the constellational images to the left? Statue of Liberty reaching the club. Do you see the twins to the left of the shepherd, true shepherd of Anu there? That's what I see. Fascinating to show these two towers and then to hear. I'm going to open the door. This alarm, I guess I was told it's first Wednesday at noon every month. This is the second time these emergency siren tests have shown themselves to Starry Telling Hour, which is now presented to you from Berkeley, California. All right. Well, there's a lot of debate about which chart we should use for the United States. And even if we choose to use the Declaration of Independence chart versus another chart, like when the United States was given independence after the Revolutionary War, or perhaps when the Constitution was set forth, right? It's interesting. Like, I believe the United States is the only country where the Declaration of Independence, rather than independence itself, is used as the chart for the country. It's kind of intriguing, right? It's kind of like a conception, or maybe even more like a birth announcement, or, we're pregnant versus the birth itself. Regardless, of course, this is when the fireworks will invoke those rockets' red glare phrases from the Star-Spangled Banner on July 4th, coming soon to a theater called You this year on a Friday on Venus's Day, where the United States celebrates its anniversary, its birthday, its solar return, right? So even if we use that July 4th, 1776 date cast for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, there's some question about when. And one of the most common times that is used is this 5:10 p.m. chart that many know as the Sibley chart. Dan Rajar looks at a time that's slightly after this one. I will say, and the reason why I put it on the screen now, is that when you look at the tower event, it is interesting to see in that chart Saturn opposite Pluto. And that they are found so close to the ascendant-descendant axis of the Sibley chart for the United States, the 5:10 p.m. chart that has 12/21 Sagittarius rising, right? I want you to notice while we're looking here that over there in the 7th house and 8th sign, that Jupiter is found then in Cancer, rather close to the 13-degree Cancer sun in the United States chart. A sun that is at the same zodiac longitude of the star Sirius, at least in 1776. Sirius was probably 12 Cancer, because the stars process against the directions, against the tropical signs. Sirius now projects to about 14 degrees tropical Cancer. But many believe that the United States was electing the sun to be aligned with the Sirius degree. And it's interesting to see Jupiter in Cancer then, as Jupiter is, of course, in Cancer now, about 24 years later, right? 2001 plus 12, 2013, and another 12, 2025. And, you know, this was one of the most patriotic times in the United States, of course. Also one of the most scary times, and, you know, the energy of patriotism which led to so much war and disaster, conquest. Wish we could say that there's been an awakening to how ridiculous that whole idea would be, and it's time to give it a rest. Anyway, maybe that's what this gate is about, and this is a gate that we're moving through. All right. Robin writes here, patriotism gone awry. Terence McKenna, who warns us that culture is not your friend. All right, let's move forward. Or back. So here's a more recent image of that Statue of Liberty and the Twin Towers now gone. Right? Instead, the One World Center, huh? One World? Turning the page 19 years later, 2020 Metonic cycle, 19 years, also featured a solar eclipse, in this case, an annular solar eclipse, the Ring of Fire on the hand of the High Man in the center of this racetrack or sacred hoop of stars. Now, I don't know, were there any global events in 2020 that you can recall? Were any of the laws that were used in 2020 to lock the populace down actually written in 2001, not only in response to the towers, but also to envelopes full of some strange powder that was created in let's not go too far. We'll have to do the conspiracy dearest transmissions offline, where we can dive deep into some of these subjects without worrying about censorship and the like. I've probably already said too much. Many of my videos have been scrubbed from the internet. Holy moly. 1982, rather close to that 1984 title of a book that was a warning about so many of the things that have been happening during the times that we have explored so far in our journey here, and that so sadly are really ramping up in 2001, in 2020, and gosh, many aren't looking, but certainly in 2025, which is a time I've kind of long been speaking about as a result of my research in Washington, D.C. So here we see an image from France, a statue that was built there for folks in New York, right? Orion as the Statue of Liberty. But here's an interesting statue that is found in Meridian Park, exactly north of the White House in Washington, D.C. Joan of Arc, who I'm told actually never held the sword, but rather the flag. But here, Joan of Arc, in a very, in my eyes, clear Orion posture, and her gaze is actually fixed in the south, right at the altitude at which Orion culminates in Washington, D.C. skies. Joan of Arc, if she was looking down, would see that she is mounted above a 13-stage fountain that looks like an Egyptian ankh. Joan of Arc, of course, that statue in Washington, D.C., not as tall as this one, America, of 19 feet, because after this statue was placed at the peak of the Capitol dome, a law was passed that no statue should be of a greater height than of this goddess freedom, or this goddess America, with the eagle feathers on her headdress. Interesting. Many mysteries in this Capitol dome. Many mysteries in DC. We see E pluribus unum written in this dome beneath the goddess's feet, out of many one. The Capitol dome with these lines drawn that are pointing somewhere, maybe to the cross-quarter risings of the sun, meaning sun at 15 Taurus or Leo towards the north of east, risings of the sun at 15 Scorpio and Aquarius to the south of east. Due east is that line pointing straight down the middle of the screen, that of course towards the equinox sunrise. It's said, however, that if you're in the dome, they're not going to let me up there, that you will see the winter solstice sun illuminate this flame at the peak of the dome of the Library of Congress building across the street. It's a very mystical and powerful building here, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. You can't see behind the trees there from this field, which is just east of the Capitol building. You can't see the beautiful Poseidon statue that's down at the base. And that's, I think, a very important part of the DC mysteries. When I give tours into the secrets of DC, we will often start at that building and be with the Poseidon statue kind of at the basement level before we walk up the stairs, and then enter the Library of Congress, which you do through this triptych of doors. You enter these days through the door on the right. I wish it was through the central door, because above each of them are statues of the muses, and the muse Astronomia, or Urania, is here above the central door. You can see this photo I took of Urania holding the zodiac globe, right? Pointing, interestingly, with a very interesting kind of grip, by the way, towards the scales. But we also see the scorpion and the archer on that globe. And they're very important parts of these mysteries, because the arrow of the archer and the stinger of the scorpion, along with the knee of the healer Ophiuchus, they triangulate the galactic center. Urania here looking due north with the angle, the elevation of her gaze just at the right pitch to be staring exactly at the celestial North Pole, which of course in our day and age hosts Polaris, North Star. So into the Library of Congress we go, where we find at the top of the stairs, above the stairs, Minerva, Athena, complete, by the way, with the brooch of Medusa and Medusa on her Aries shield and so much more. She's holding a scroll that shows the divine sciences like biology and chemistry and astronomy. I like to kid, I don't think really, that the astrology is in the curled up bit, right? And I don't think that's a joke at all, actually, because if she could extend her gaze, Athena, for whom Athens was named, you see, she brought forth the greater creation than Poseidon, right? So for me, it's Poseidon down at the basement level and Athena exalted on high, because like Athens, the United States, or at least the city of Washington, D.C., is called Athena in as a patron saint, as a celestial protector and director and guide. Anyway, here Athena or Minerva's looking above the zodiac floor of the Library of Congress, which has been one of my most important teachers. So zoom in a little bit, and I learned from this floor that the tropical zodiac, like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, is directionally aligned. The cusp here between Virgo and Libra is due west, just as the cusp on the other side between Pisces and Aries is due east. That is the truth, not of the star zodiac, the constellations, not of some sidereal zodiac, but of the tropical zodiac, that the north pole of Earth leans forever towards the place on the sun's path that we call the cusp of Cancer, and the South Pole towards the Sagittarius Capricorn cusp. And I could go on, but I owe so much gratitude actually just to the floor of this building, where I noticed that directional alignment. At first, I assumed they did it wrong. And frankly, it's because my first teacher does. And then it initiated me into the directional reality of the tropical zodiac, which of course is, I feel, what I'm most implored to teach. Anyway, the sun in the midst of the zodiac here in Washington, D.C. is an amazing thing. It has the binary code within. Really, it skips the 2 and goes straight to 4, the compass rose. You can see the 8 as well. And then 16, 32, 64. But the serpent weave here in the middle has 19 coils. Well, 19 is the amount of solar years required for the polyrhythms of Earth-Sun seasons and Earth-Moon-Sun lunations to synchronize. Every 19 years is almost exactly equal to 235 lunations, right? So new moon to new moon, which is 29 and a half-ish days. East equinox sun to east equinox sun, like 365.242 days. Those things synchronize every 19 years, 235 lunations. I remember that, by the way, because 19 is the sun card of the tarot, and the tilt angle of Earth in our day and age is like 23.5 degrees. Ditch the decimal, 235 lunations in 19 years. And that sacred key of sun, moon, and Earth is here embedded in this golden sun in the center of the zodiac on the floor of the Library of Congress. Now, when we look in the other direction, we find some mysteries that I guess I'll get to, because we're going to first look in the same direction, but from further west. Here is Abe Lincoln sitting in his memorial, staring at that strange phallus, that Washington monument. In L'Enfant's original plan, it was meant to be George Washington on horseback. Right? So why this gigantic thing? And if you're in DC, I suggest you prearrange the tour. It's free. I just paid some tax dollars for this, but you can take a free elevator ride to the top of the Washington Monument. It's cool to be up top where you can look through. There's windows in each of the cardinal directions. This is all cardinal, right? So you can look north and east and south and west. And when you ride the elevator down, they stop in some places and illuminate many of these stones that were sent by Masonic lodges, not from only different states of the US, but from places around the world, to construct this strange monument in DC. So the Abe Lincoln Memorial, which of course was not in L'Enfant's plan as well, he didn't have a time machine, I don't believe, is due west of the Washington Monument. It's interesting to see this photo. I should grab another one. I keep going out there and taking photos and then not dealing with them. But this, Lincoln's looking at the reflecting pool. Here it's empty, which might be an interesting thing to consider as well. Are we empty of the ability to reflect these days in this city that was meant to be, I don't know, a temple to freedom? Regardless, Lincoln, many have pointed out in this statue, who has the fascia beneath his hands, it looks a whole lot like the Emperor card of the Rider-Waite Coleman Smith tarot deck. I mean, even look at the feet, which are the Pisces parts of us, right? But the Emperor is said to be the Aries card. Well, again, we're starting in the last stages of a long teaching that first shows how this Aries glyph is embellic of the fountain of youth, the eastern sky, which rises like the horns of the ram and curls around later to set in the west. That stars that rise south of east head to the south, north of east head to the north. When you're in Washington, D.C., you need to tilt your head 30-something degrees to see that. It's the equator where you get that perfect fountain of youth vision, right? But here Lincoln's looking due east at this pillar marking the celestial equator, which always cuts through east and west, right? And in our day and age, because Orion's belt is on the equator, and this changes with the great year of precession, the 26,000 year, in our day and age, because Orion's belt is on the equator, Orion's belt rises due east and sets due west. In the northern hemisphere sky, it rises like a pillar like this. And I actually believe that the Washington Monument was created to align with this celestial happening of our day and age, and that later Lincoln was stationed to observe this arising of Orion's belt on the pillar. So now we're looking from the east, Capitol building, to the Washington Monument there. Orion's belt sets in the northern hemisphere sky horizontally. So rises vertically like the pillar and then sets horizontally. So you get the three belt stars next to each other setting into due west, right? Again, Orion's belt aligned to the celestial equator. In our day and age, that changes with precession. So rising due east in the northern hemisphere, you view like a pillar and setting horizontally into the western horizon. Well, if I could take those three stars and kind of stretch them out, I would see an alignment from the Capitol building, from We the People, where all the star mysteries are really configured, not only to that Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial behind, but also to the temple down Pennsylvania Avenue in one direction and that down Maryland Avenue in the other. And those are the White House down Pennsylvania Avenue, so northwest of the Capitol. And then the Jefferson Memorial down Maryland Avenue, so southwest of the Capitol building. Jefferson Memorial also not in L'Enfant's plan for DC, right? Though, of course, Jefferson was around at that time and was a great contributor to this layout and perhaps alignment to the stars. There was no land where the Jefferson Memorial now stands. That was the Potomac River, which has been filled in. All right, let's move forward. You can see here from the Capitol building this compass, right? You can see one of many pentacles that's around Washington, D.C. That star on the right is over a building that some call the true White House. Look into the House of the Temple. Further up that way is Meridian Park. But for now, let's just look at this interesting compass and square. The compass points, so Pennsylvania Avenue in the northwest direction to the White House, and then Maryland Avenue in the southwest direction to the Jefferson Memorial, they continue on to the setting of Aldebaran, the royal star, the eye of the bull, and to the setting of Sirius, right? As Osiris, it said, became the stars we know as Orion in the sky, his queen Isis became Sirius, the brightest star, right? And they follow each other through the sky. And again, many suggest that the United States elected July 4th in 1776 because that's when our star, when the sun was at the Sirius longitudes. I see something maybe beyond that. And I learned much of this in Washington, D.C. Due west, so setting into the Washington Monument from the Capitol building's view, Orion's Belt setting onto the Lincoln Memorial, and some interesting horses on bridges behind, some of them winged, the Pegasus. I see you, James. All right. Now, to be fair, these might not be Aldebaran and Sirius alignments because a very interesting truth of our day and age, and this changes with precession, is that the cross-quarter suns set in the same place and rise in the same place as these powerful stars, Aldebaran, Sirius, these stars of the sacred hoop. So when the sun's at 15 Taurus or 15 tropical Leo, it's going to set north of west where Aldebaran sets. When the sun's at 15 tropical Scorpio or Aquarius, the sun's going to set where Sirius sets, south of west. That's only true in our day and age of precession. So it might be that the DC streets were aligned to those cross-quarter phenomena and not to these stars, but I think it was aligned to both, and also to help us see the importance of our cross-quarter suns aligned with the setting stars, the compass ticks, the azimuths of these sacred stars, Aldebaran and Sirius, in our day and age. So that's the compass. But what about the cross, which is very easy to find in this so-called DC Mall? Cardinally aligned from the Capitol building in the east to the Lincoln Memorial, through the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial in the west, and then the arms of the cross to the White House in the north, and to the Jefferson Memorial in the south. Now, there's kind of a riddle here. You can see the sundial, the Washington Monument shadow pointing at this time to the White House. So that doesn't happen at solar noon. It only would if the Washington Monument, now conveniently placed in the heart of a vesica, in the yoni of a vesica. What's this image in the White House's back lawn? Anyway, the shadow doesn't point to the White House at solar noon. That would only happen if the Washington Monument was on this same meridian line that the Jefferson Memorial and the White House are. Further up, exactly 1 mile north of the White House, the House of the Temple. Further north of there, Meridian Park and the Joan of Arc statue. And that's called meridian because the United States proposed it to be the prime meridian for the world. They got one vote. France got a couple. Most of them went to Greenwich, which now we call the prime meridian. But who said? Anyway, why isn't the Washington Monument on that same meridian line? Now, when you take the tours in DC, you'll be told that it couldn't be placed there, that's where the Washington on a horse statue was meant to be. And again, Jefferson Memorial wasn't on the plan anyway, because that's all landfill, maybe, as you can see. But the same reason is offered as why the Washington Monument's not on the meridian, because this is landfill. It's soft land, that it's land that could not support the massive weight of these Masonic stones. So they had to move it a bit towards the east. I don't think so. Let's ask Orion. And it seems way beyond coincidence to me that these three temples, the Jefferson Memorial, the Washington Monument, and the White House, are configured to the geometry of the three stars of Orion's belt, just as are the Great Pyramids of Giza. Now, in Washington, D.C., it's not as precise, but it is very close. And of course, these cats, these builders, were into the ancient alignments. A thing that I learned in seeing that was there's this kind of, definitely as above, so below, but there's like this as above, so above, that the three stars of Orion's belt actually have the same geometry as Sirius, Orion's belt, and Aldebaran do, which kind of blows my mind. We enter the Capitol building now, and we see the statue of George Washington beneath a very interesting painting called the Apotheosis of Washington that was painted by Constantine Brumidi. Brumidi having been broken out of Vatican prison for being a practicing Mason, amongst other philosophical crimes, along with his family. Well, his family was in prison. I think he was the only one broken out, but he was brought here to paint first a church in New York, and then he was known as the painter of the Capitol. He almost died painting this Apotheosis image at the top of the Capitol dome. But he painted much more, many of the zodiacs that can be found in the Senate and the congressional halls. And he painted everything in the frieze that we see here beneath the Apotheosis, except for an image of the Wright brothers, which was added later. It turned out he did his math wrong. And so when he painted the last of these images of so-called contact, called colonialist, genocide, conquest, anyway, that he didn't span it right. He actually died before they were complete, so they were completed by one of his apprentices. But there was another space that was just reserved. It was later, like you can see there's a painting of the Wright brothers. But this, for me, is the most interesting of these. This is an image of Montezuma II receiving Cortez, which, by the way, never happened. But I think the most important thing to see here is the Mexica sunstone behind Montezuma. All right, folks at Instagram who are witnessing this live, we're just about to reach our hour max. So head over to my YouTube page. You can click on the link tree in my Instagram bio to get there, or just do geminibrett.com/YouTube, and it'll bring you to my live streams where this is also happening. Please give the video a like and do the thing, share it around and all that, and I hope to see you on the other side. Right. I think we're alone now. So this Mexica sunstone, which many presented as like the long count calendar of the Mayan tradition, that's not what it is, but it is also an image of the turning of the ages, the 5 suns. There's an interesting image in front of this priestess in a hood, kind of kneeled over a 4-pointed star, which interesting, the Maya use, and this isn't Mayan, but the Maya uses an image for Venus. But I think there's an image of the 4 and the 5 coming together. And again, like we would have had to do a whole bunch of work before this, like I do in the presentation of this material, to get to why the 4 and the 5 is so important in our day and age, maybe marking this particular sun on the cross alignment that I think is shown in the Capitol Dome and many other places as kind of the big one during the great year of about 26,000 years, the Platonic year, the precessional year. All right, well, let's focus in on the apotheosis. And I owe credit to a few researchers, teachers, one of them being Scott Onstott, who first, through his wonderful work called Secrets in Plain Sight, made me aware of some of these mysteries of DC and how it aligns to sacred star temples and other places of the world, and how these project of building and showing the mysteries in plain sight has been something that's been going on for a long time. It might just be a law. Interesting. Anyway, also to David Oveson, whose book Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital has much to reveal. I will say that when I put my feet on the ground in DC, I found that Oveson's principal theory about the Capitol building, Washington Monument, White House being a Pythagorean triangle aligning the stars known as Spica, Arcturus, and Regulus just doesn't really work astronomically. And that's when I stumbled onto the Orion alignments, which I know to make so much sense. But anyway, the work of David Oveson and The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital is amazing. I highly recommend that read. And then also to the work of William Henry, who speaks of this place, the Capitol Dome, as some type of stargate that was built for the ascension of our souls. And I'm happy to have come across that because when I first then went here as an adult and as a seeker and star student, I was able to gaze up with different eyes than maybe I would have through the eyes of Scorpio Joe, who might just see this all as an image of control. And there's much to find here. And I didn't see it right away. I saw this and I went and I slept and I had a dream in which Hermes visited me. And he said, "You know what you were looking at, right?" And that was it. And I woke up seeing the starry truth of this space-time image. Now, let me say this before we go there. Beneath this painting, which is on the Capitol Dome, you can go down a floor and you find the compass rose of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a perfect diamond aligned to the cardinal directions, right? 10 miles in perimeter. Which has something to do with squaring the circle, and that's a tale for a deeper time. But the heart of that diamond, cardinally aligned, is the Capitol building, right? It's the axis mundi, it's the center. And beneath this painting, the next floor down, you're in the statue hall, and in the center of it, there's the compass rose. And on the tour, they'll tell you that beneath that is a broom closet. But that broom closet was intended to be Washington's tomb. He wasn't buried there. He died in this strange way and chose instead to be buried at home across the river in Mount Vernon. You'll be told if you do the research that folks in DC then begged Martha to move his body to this tomb in the Capitol building where he was, quote unquote, meant to be buried. And she said, "Okay, when I die, you can move him there and bury me at his side." And so it was going to be that way. Interestingly, twins in this tomb. But when Martha died, none of that went down. She was instead buried next to George in Mount Vernon, the farm, you know. I wonder if he was ever meant to be buried there at all. That maybe those who asked for his body to be moved didn't understand that this is meant to be a ritualistic burial chamber where folks could be initiated into the mysteries through their own personal resurrection. Maybe you're familiar with the ritual of which I speak. I can say that I'm only familiar with it from looking from the outside. But I also believe that the so-called sarcophagus of the Great Pyramid of Giza was never meant to be a place where some pharaoh was buried. We've never seen an original burial in a pyramid, but that it was meant to be a sarcophagus, again, for a similar ritual of death and rebirth. Some would suggest even that part of the mystery tradition that goes back to Kemet and later was also around in Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries, brought forth by Demeter and Persephone, right? That they had kind of cracked the code of perhaps some sacred plant use that would actually kill you, and then you would be revived and brought back to life, so that you could go where we do when we die. And being brought back to life on Earth, having seen that, you could choose to walk a better path than maybe you would otherwise. Who's to say, right? Part of the Eleusinian mysteries is, you could go once, and if you ever talked about it, you'd be killed for real, right? Anyway, Napoleon, it said, spent a night in that sarcophagus in the chamber, the so-called King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, and it's reported said that you wouldn't believe me if I told you what happened last night, right? I believe that the Capitol building, and some of this, again, William Henry's work kind of hipped me to at least opening my eyes to this possibility, was about creating a, I don't know, death rebirth chamber, or maybe a space-time portal. What I can share for you, right? Like where my expertise resides is in the stories of the stars. Notice that there's some stars around this painting. Just how many? Sacred geometry might help you get there without just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 72. Because you can see, I hope, the hexagon here, or the Merkaba, right? The seal of Solomon, the upward triangle and the downward triangle. You can't see it at all because you're just looking at my face. I just realized, so let me put this image back on the screen. And I think you can see my wand wavering around here at Mercury and his caduceus staff. Here above these twins, that's interesting, who hold a banner, say, E pluribus unum, right? But you see this triangle. So that's Mercury and, well, let's go Greek. Hermes and Athena and Demeter, or let's go Latin. Mercury, Minerva, and Ceres, all right? And then in this other triangle, we find America, freedom, this new goddess, perhaps, although I'm interested in her posture. Are you? Anyway, see this other triangle. So this would be America, Vulcan, and Neptune. And Venus is here actually with Neptune, or Aphrodite, Poseidon, Hephaestus, and America, right? Well, we're told that Brahmidi was tasked to paint agriculture. And so, of course, we bring forth Demeter. Interestingly, there's 7 sisters here, the Pleiades, who sit on the bull's back. All right. Hephaestus for industry. Hephaestus, or Vulcan, of course, being the one who created the chariot for the gods and much more, right? We see Hermes representing commerce. He's hanging a bag of gold to Morse over here. Right? Then, of course, Poseidon, interestingly, Venus as well, or Aphrodite, being in the maritime space. You see the trident here, right? And then this is said to be, I think, invention. And we find Athena with Ben Franklin. Now, notice this rainbow connecting Athena to Ceres. Gosh, Demeter and Athena, Minerva and Ceres. It's so hard for me not to mix the Greek and the Latin. Here we find George Washington in full military regalia between these 2 angels, one holding a fascia and one blowing the trumpet with the acacia, perhaps. Some say it's the olive branch. He's holding a dagger pointing downwards, blanket over his legs. Like what? Pointing in a very interesting posture to an open book. That's the mysteries revealed. That we can count 12 as long as you count these two as one, for they are the twins. And so when Hermes said, you know what you were looking at, right? I was like, oh, right. Not only is this something I had been told to look for, which is this image that's so similar to the second coming of Christ, right? You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One coming on the clouds of heaven. That's what I've learned to see in this. But like so many, I don't know, Renaissance paintings of the second coming of Christ, we see Christ sitting above an angel on a rainbow. Notice the sword and the plant. But what I was shown to see, not only these 72 stars that surround this sacred painting. Why is that important? Because there are 72 years in each degree of precession. But I also learned to see that this is the sun, here displayed as George Washington, sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One on the clouds of heaven. For I saw these constellations of the sacred hoop. The astronomers these days call this asterism, kind of a super constellation formed by stars from different constellations, the winter hexagon. And it's created by Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, Capella, the bright star in Auriga, the charioteer, Castor and Pollux, the heads of the twins, Procyon, the small dog of Orion, Sirius, the big dog of Orion, and then Rigel, which is Orion's leading foot. Okay. Well, let's see how this aligns also mythically, right? Mercury with the twins. Of course, Mercury said to rule Gemini, the sign that once aligned into the twins constellations in Hellenistic times. Procyon, why would Poseidon get the small dog and Athena the big dog? Because Poseidon brought forth the river and the Acropolis, but it was salty, and Athena brought forth the olive branch, so she won this competition for which of these guides and guidesses would be the guiding light for the city now called Athens, after Athena, as I mentioned before, right? So Poseidon, the small dog, Athena, the big dog in that competition for which Athens was named. We can take that story much deeper into Medusa and Perseus and the Pegasus and Andromeda, and I could go on, but not today. Aldebaran, the bull. Taurus, long associated, of course, with agriculture. So we see Ceres painted there, right? Auriga, the charioteer, right? So we see Hephaestus there and speak about, industry. So this is also very much aligned mythically. Interestingly, Washington kind of is in two places. One, he's very much aligned with where Betelgeuse, the brightest star of the Orion constellation, the shoulder of Orion, which holds that club or holds that crook, right? But also symbolically, you can see that America, freedom down below, is in Orion posture, right? And then we could see that Washington is sitting in the place where we found the solar eclipse in June of 1982 at the June or North solstice of 2001, and 19 years later, a Metonic series later in 2020. And by the way, we will have eclipses on that point again, but not during the time of galactic alignment. So what is that? Let's put our feet on the ground and look at this place. And we're going to look at this view through different eyes. So the Dakota people call this group of stars the sacred hoop. Now, instead of Aldebaran, they use the Pleiades on the bull's back. Okay, so as above, so below. First of all, this racetrack of stars is on sacred land, now called the Black Hills, a place where the Lakota say they come from. It came out of the earth there. And there's a story about how Magpie saved the human race by jumping off the back of the buffalo. And I encourage you to learn it. But that this racetrack was 4 times around this place on Earth, where we see the physical earthly embodiment of these stars on this sacred hoop. So the place that white man calls Devil's Tower, for example, which is meant to be called the bear's den, is that on earth, as above, so below. That's indicative of the bear's den in the heavens, which you and I know is the constellation of the twins. So the Lakota say that this great hoop in the heavens is the place where our souls come from. And that later as well, when we die, we will pass back through this hoop of stars in the heavens to be purified. That hoop of stars is the Inipi, the sweat lodge in the sky, where we will be purified. See on the left, this fire pit, many of us know that is the lion's head. So this is where the stones, the grandfathers, are heated to bring into the lodge, right? So that we can sweat and be realigned. And it said we walk the spirit road, which is the Milky Way, to a place that sets in the southwest. By the way, most of that, almost all of that, coming from an amazing revelation of Lakota star wisdom in a book by Ronald Goodman called Lakota Star Knowledge. And really, it's a book by many elders of that tradition. Ronald Goodman interviewed them, and showed a few pieces of evidence that exist, at least exoterically, like still revealed from these traditions, though so much of it has been erased through genocide. But hopefully coming back. And it's a really wonderful way to connect to this great group of stars in the heavens. So I'll show you again the Western view of them, so you can place them with constellations that perhaps you greater know. But first, we're going to bring in the planets at an interesting time. So hopefully you can see here now the sun. I've supersized the planets. So here's Jupiter and Mars. Mercury is very close by. Uranus not so far away too. Venus actually here. This is Mars, kind of right in the center of the hoop at this time shown. Then this would be Venus and Jupiter, the sun, kind of hard to see. So maybe we should bring in a chart. So what is this time of these planets in these places? And again, the sacred hoop of stars, of course, Mercury and Poseidon and, America. Orion. So Regal, Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, the Pleiades, Capella, the bright star of the charioteer, the twins, all right, and the small dog, Procyon, the Bohemian magical star there, and the big dog, Sirius, our brightest star here, right? And you can see how the Milky Way, right, that rainbow runs through this place. You can see also this is this is the zenith. I can't remember, I think I have this cast for Philadelphia, maybe not Washington, D.C., but they're very close, right? So the charioteer actually zeniths or goes directly overhead in that place. Just as when you're looking up at the Capitol Dome, you're looking straight above your head, right? So what is this time that we're looking at? This was the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. I didn't cast it for that 5:10 p.m., by the way. I cast it at a time when the Galactic Anti-Center, that's labeled here as GA, was culminating. Just so we could get this whole sacred hoop of stars here shown kind of in the constellational images of the West, right? High enough for you to see. Okay, so at this time in July 4th, 1776, let's bring in a chart. We get that Cancer sun, okay? Cancer is no longer aligned to the crab. It hasn't been for thousands of years. The Tropic of Cancer, which is this point here, it's the point that's most north of the equator, right? So equator, Tropic of Cancer, that's the key to the tropical zodiac, right? So the Tropic of Cancer is now aligned to the foot of the twins. And actually, since then in 1776, and we'll see this zoomed in, it's now moved on to the hand of the high man. That's part of this turning of the ages prophecy, I very much believe. So you can see to the east of the sun, Mercury. He's hard to find here. And then to the west, we get Jupiter and Venus side by side. Here's Mars in the center of the hoop. And then Uranus actually over here. I misspoke and put him over here on that side before. 12 years later. Why 12 years later? Oops, that's 24. Because Jupiter takes about 12 years to get around, right? We find at this time Jupiter right on the hand of the high man, right on the club of Orion. All right. And unlike in 1776, when we wouldn't have seen that at all, because they're under the beams of the sun, right? And I would suggest that this time of the Declaration of Independence, well, I imagine they elected it. It's hard to say, imagine that election would also be rushed by the necessity of the times, right? Well, for the Constitution, they really could have chosen the date, right? So the Constitution is in 1787, right? It's actually 13 years later. And Jupiter now is right on the hand of the high man. Jupiter in Cancer. So I must have done some math wrong. Right, this is 11 years later. My bad, because Jupiter was in Cancer in the July 4th, 1776 chart. And here we haven't quite reached 12 years. Now Mars is on the scene again. But I imagine this was a Jupiter election. And I don't think they were trying to put Jupiter at 25 tropical Gemini or Sun square Jupiter, which are other features of this chart, as you can see. I believe they were working Jupiter on the hand of the high man. Now, 12 years later, we get a similar image. Jupiter on the hand of the high man. This was George Washington's very strange death. So the story goes, Washington as an old man is out working the farm in the snow. And he's too old for that shit. And he falls sick. But unfortunately, because the roads are covered with ice, his doctor couldn't make it in time. So he had to be treated by the local hack, who, of course, healed him by leeching him. And I don't know how anybody could even theorize this, but I've read that they took a third of his blood. Turns out you need blood to live. And so Washington dies. It's interesting to me that Washington's death 12 years later comes at the very next time that Jupiter is on the hand of the high man. And I even wonder if this was elected. Like the magical moment when Jupiter is opening this portal. Right? I doubt Washington would have known it as the inipi in the sky through which we can be purified, and I imagine he needed much of that. Who doesn't? Before we can walk the spirit road to a place that sits in the southwest, which would certainly be the galactic center, the Golden Gate. Here we're looking at the Silver Gate on the opposite side, the galactic cross of ecliptic and galactic equator, galactic anticenter. And, I don't know what was happening in George Washington's mind, and if in some way this was interestingly elected or just, synchronicity, coincidence. But there are things I wanted to show you. Okay, so getting now to current time, I believe. I want to show you this Declaration of Independence, 1776. So we can see where Jupiter was at this time here in the twins. So that's constellational, or we could do a sidereal zodiac. This chart's cast in tropical zodiac, though, okay? So I want you to see Jupiter at 556 tropical Cancer, all right? Well, the Tropic of Cancer has since precessed through the stars. So I'm showing here this cross, okay, of the ecliptic and the galactic equator. Let's zoom in a bit. In 1776, you can see the Tropic of Cancer was then clearly in the foot of Castor, the mortal twin, and not on the hand of the high man. The galactic cross of the ecliptic and the equator always is, okay? But we've had 249 years of precession since then. I'm going to stop somewhere along the way. 200 years after that Declaration of Independence, here's the bicentennial, right? And notice now that the Tropic of Cancer, the point of the sun's path, which is most north of the equator, conveniently indicated by Stellarium astronomy software. It's such an amazing thing, Stellarium, by the Cancer glyph. Okay, so the Tropic of Cancer, which is not a constellational thing, the crab's all the way over here, right? Constellations and signs are very different things. And tropical Cancer begins at the Tropic of Cancer, the point of greatest northern declination, the point of the sun's path that's most north of Earth's equator, all right? And in the sky, our celestial equator. And then this is the galactic equator here in like light blue, right? So this is one of the two galactic crosses, right? The other one being on the solstice side. In our day and age, it's 0 Capricorn is now aligned to the galactic cross near galactic center, and 0 Cancer at the galactic cross on this opposite side near galactic anticenter in the sacred hoop of stars. Now, the exact alignment came another 24 years, interestingly, after 1976. It was in 1998. I'm showing July 4th, but I think it was in May, when the 0 Cancer point, the Tropic of Cancer, precisely aligned, and therefore 0 Capricorn on the other side precisely aligned with the galactic equator. And so this is the center moment of galactic alignment, which you might add 36 years before and after, since precession is 1 degree every 72 years, indicated by the 72 stars surrounding the Apotheosis of George Washington. You might add 72 years to either side. You might add more, because the entire Milky Way band, the clouds of heaven on the right hand of the Mighty One here, are going to take longer to go through. But since 0 Cancer is now aligned to this place of the heavens, and this is a once in 26,000 year thing, we now get the summer solstice sun, the height of the light, the glory of the king, from the northern hemisphere view of places like Jerusalem, on the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on the clouds of heaven. This is July 4th, 2025, so that you can see that the 0 Cancer point, the Tropic of Cancer, is now slipped in its precession through the stars, or we can say the stars processing through the tropical signs. Like, we're now not in that exact alignment as it was in 1998. So the 2001 eclipse there more strongly aligned than the 1982 or the 2020 eclipses on the hand of the high man. But we're still in this time of galactic alignment, no doubt. And I believe it is completely signified in that Apotheosis of George Washington painting on the Capitol Dome with its 72 stars surrounding it. And there's a portal that's open now. So to the charts we go, and we'll show you this July 4th, 2025 solar return for the United States. Now, at the time, Aquarius is on the rise. Pluto is there. Look at Uranus right at the IC of Philadelphia, PA, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. We can also take a look at this from the Washington, D.C. view, not so far away. But most importantly, look at where Jupiter is. Of course, the sun's at the same tropical zodiac degree. This is a tropical zodiac solar return. I'm a tropical astrologer because the tropical zodiac is the zodiac of Earth configured to the world tree, the rotational axis, and therefore the cardinal directions. Like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the tropical zodiac is directionally aligned. And it's a big deal when Gaia's spine is leaning towards the light. That's solstice time, right? And here we see like 13 days, 13 degrees after July 4th. We'll look at Jupiter at 544 Cancer, so close to that position on the so-called birth chart for the United States, right? So you're seeing 4 charts here. I'm going to slim this down to only the Sun and Jupiter and these 4 or 3 outer wheels. So you can see this. Okay, the inner wheel is the July 4th, 1776 chart, Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I chose the 5:10 p.m. the Sibley timing. And again, I feel like the Tower event kind of agrees to that time. The ring closest to the center is the first Jupiter Synodic Return. So it's an 83-year period. So 83 years after 1776, 1859. Now, if you know about, the events leading to the Civil War, like some say the worst president ever, and many states who were then speaking about leaving the Union. Also, John Brown's body happened in 1859. Though the Civil War, I believe, didn't break out officially until 1861. Events leading there, okay? The next ring out, we get the second U.S. Synodic Return, July 5th, 1942. At this point, we are now in World War II because of because of the Pearl Harbor attack in December of 1941. And 83 years later, July 4th, 2025, this Friday. So I've been somewhat concerned about 2025 for a decade now, since I first started kind of cracking the code of the DC star map. 84 years is the Uranus return. So here I'm just showing exact tropical realignments of Uranus for the United States. I think there were 3 in 1860, 61, and maybe this is the first or the second. I can't quite remember when I built the slide. So June 16th, 1860. We get 1944, not too long before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, obviously Manhattan Project in full force at that time. And then July 26, 2027, we will have our next return of Uranus to the place where Uranus resided at the time of the Declaration of Independence. So Uranus was not discovered for another 5 years. So what is this? And are we to expect war and bombs? Or grand old flags? Or both? Could this be another time where patriotism is kind of leading us awry? What do we do about it, you and I? The answer there, of course, is just be the best you can be. Make a beautiful universe. I feel like if we can realign ourselves to these mysteries, it can help the energies align in a way we would like for them to. And so I'm called to share them with you. I want to take a quick exploration. I mean to do this in length another time. Maybe in Constellations, we'll take this on a deep dive. If you don't know about Constellations, by the way, I see many of you here are in our crew have already aligned your star with ours. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so happy to be able to spend time and deep conversation with fellow star students like myself and my partner Scorpiana. Check out GeminiBrett.com/constellations if you don't know about us. And by the way, you can use the coupon code STAR TRIBE. It's one word when you're there. If you want to save some dollars and some cents, and give us a try for a month. Anna and I will be bringing our orbit from a month of the moon now to a month of the lunar node, starting with the class this Saturday, the Saturn's Day, July 5th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And then the following Thursday, Anna does a coaching circle. The following Thursday, I do an astrological deep dive, and then we close it out with a community gathering Q&A session, revelation of our experience. We've toured the sun, so all those recordings will be waiting for you if you sign up now. We've toured the moon for a month, and now it's going to be the lunar nodes for a month, and then Earth. Whoever visits Earth in our astrological study. And we're doing this 1 month at a time per planet so we can really like dive deep and integrate. Yeah. And I'm so happy that Scorpio, Anna, my beloved partner, has joined me in Constellations this year. I'm really loving her wisdom teachings and the open state of her heart to hold space. And that's the idea in Constellations. It's a place where you can share your voice, where you can share your experience. I'm just going right now today, finally through these images of different moon altars that many of you have built this month. And there's so much beauty and power and magic there. I'm really so honored to have the opportunity to get weird with fellow weirdos. We don't do enough of this. So in Constellations, there's also regularly scheduled community gatherings hosted by stars of our sacred lines. So you can share your voice and get to know some peers and do some research and the like. And so I'm planning, as I said before, to do a Scorpio Joe conspiracy dearest session on the astrology of false flag events, because I'm somewhat concerned that one might come soon. But for now, I just want to show you a bit about Jupiter. So as we saw, because the United States is about to turn an 83, 249 years old, if we use this Declaration of Independence date for the birth of the United States, notice how Jupiter here at 544 Cancer is only 12 arc minutes away from the natal placement. I mean, that's just as aligned as it can get. All right. So like, let me go back to the previous Jupiter return, be about 12 years ago, but really it's 11.86. And, the sun's over here. And the previous one, the sun's over here in 2002. All right, well, what's happening in that time, by the way? What's happening in 2013? Interesting things to consider. We can go back to the previous Jupiter return and see that's a retrograde Jupiter. So in this time in 2002, apparently in 2001, interesting, there's 3 of them. But look at where the sun is, right? So I'd have to do this 12 times to go back 83 years. And with the retrogrades, it's more than 12 exact realignments to get back to 1942, where this happened in July 6th, right? And so let's just do the solar return just before then, and we'll see this, right? That's twice 83 from 1776, and Jupiter at 549 at that solar return time, 166 years after 1776, right? I can go back 83 years before then, and we see that this happened for the first time in 1859, as I had showed before, right? So that's kind of the greater number of the Jupiter Synodic Cycle, 83 years, this realignment of Sun-Jupiter phase at solar return time. So we would love for this to be more Jupiter, right? Like, how about more hope and grace and spirit? But Jupiter can also blow things up. And what's blowing up Cancer? How about big nurturing, big caring, right? But that can also be your clan, your cult, and that kind of patriotic thing, which can be beautiful. She's a grand old flag. And there's nary a boast nor brag. Really? Maybe we need to work on that bit a little bit. And of course, many of you are reporting here. I see Ireland in the house. I see New Zealand in the house, for example, in different places. I don't mean to make this about the United States, but given that there's so many bombs around right now, it's a little concerning. And it's the only country that's dropped a nuclear bomb. Interesting. While fingers are pointed at everyone else, they can't have a nuke. It'd be crazy if somebody had one and would actually use it. Okay. There's a lot of cleanup on aisle self to do, Julian says, I hate to say it, but MAGA sounds like a Jupiter Cancer from an American perspective. I'd have to understand more about that. those who would study the traditions of magic might understand why MAGA isn't just some acronym. But anyway, I want to show you just the Jupiter Synodic Cycle, 83 years aside. And I think we'll utilize the United States to show this because there is an 83-year pattern, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from this Sibley time, and I'm going to go forward a day. To show you the following, let's go back to the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Sun conjunct Jupiter. Okay, which would have been here in 1776 at 337 degrees Cancer. Okay, well, let me go now. And where was our previous Sun-Jupiter conjunction? 321 Cancer. That's that 83-year pattern. All right, so we're going to turn this to a 0 Aries wheel. We're going to look only at Sun and Jupiter, if we can. All right, and what I'm going to show you is that Sun aligns between Earth and Jupiter about every 399 days. So let's go back in time. Where was the previous one to this June 24th, 2025, where Jupiter and Sun recently aligned on the hand of the high man in the clouds of heaven? All right, and by the way, that might be what that Washington painting is evoking. So 399 days-ish before June 24, 2025, Sun and Jupiter aligned in Taurus. Now, I'll just say this is kind of interesting because if we go back through these, this is May 18th, 2024. Let's go about 399 days before Aries in 2023. Pisces in 2022. We get to Aquarius in 2021. Now, if it's 399 days, right, what's 399 minus 365? And the answer is 34, all right? So we should expect the previous one to be a year and 34 days before this, or a year and 34-ish degrees before this, so around 5 degrees Capricorn, right? And that's here in 2019. All right, we'll subtract another 34 degrees, so like 1 degree Sagittarius here, but it was 4 degrees in 2018. Now, that's telling us that not all cycles are 399 days. Why would that be? Because ellipses are orbital. Orbits are elliptical, not circular. Right? And so there are places in Jupiter's journey about the sun where Jupiter gets far from the sun, aphelion, and close to the sun, perihelion. There are places in Earth's orbit of the sun where Earth gets far from the sun, aphelion, that's happening in July, and close to the sun, perihelion, and that's happening in January. Let me say, we're far from the sun in Capricorn. Around July 4th, actually, is when we're furthest from the sun, and we're close to the sun around January 1st. When the sun is in Capricorn, we're close. When the sun is in Cancer, we're far. Jupiter has his own apsides. So when we look at those things together, it's going to change the period between consecutive Sun-Jupiter conjunctions. The average is 399 days. Okay, but it's not like that every time. That's just an important thing to know. When we learn these averages, it's good to have those keys, but they are averages. Right? The ellipses, not circles. Michael, I see you asking what software is that? I'm assuming because that just came in that we're talking about the astrology software. I'm using Astro Gold astrology software. And most of what we were looking at before was coming from the wonderful astronomy software called Stellarium, which you can get for free at stellarium.org. Astro Gold astrology software is for the Mac alone, but it can work for phones. The iOS version, maybe that's I think they have a Android version and all that too. It's not as big as this program, but the Astro Gold astrology software that we're looking at here is only for the Mac. All right, so for Sag, if it was 399 days before, we'd expect this previous one to have skipped Scorpio. And that's not true. Okay, look at this, is just about a year before, right? October 26, 2017, November 26, 2018, November 27th, 2019. You see how it's staying close? And by the way, do this with lunations. You'll see a kind of similar interesting thing, and it has to do with the ellipse of Earth's orbit of the sun. But let's go back. So we have Scorpio in 2017, Libra in 2016, Virgo in 2015. Now we're going to start seeing the greatest differences between degrees. So here's Leo in 2014. And in this case, we go back to Gemini. So in that kind of orbit of the zodiac for these Sun-Jupiter conjunctions, we skipped Cancer, right? And now we just had one in Cancer. But when I go back to the previous, we had skipped Gemini. So we're going to start exploring this as kind of like where the skips happen. And I'm going to go back to 1859. Maybe we should actually look at this here. Here's a great one to start, 1975. You know, very important things happened that year. I was born. Cute. But why this one? Because so often we're very interested in the east point, right? The Pisces-Aries cusp is due east of the center of Earth, and therefore works like a global ascendant. So we watch that point precess through the constellations or the sidereal signs to speak about the turning of the ages, like the spawning of the age of Aquarius, right? And while it's not exactly at that zero Aries point that Saturn and Neptune are transiting at this time, we do see the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. So to begin on average, 399-day synodic cycle there in Aries in 75. Let's go back 83 years. And we'll see the same thing. All right, so Sun-Jupiter conjunction, one exact Aries, right? Let's go back 83 years. And we get one then at one Aries too. It's weird that the computer didn't align them perfectly. So that's 1809. Let's go back 83 years before then. And we get in 1726 a conjunction at 117, 116-ish Aries, okay? So interestingly, even there, we're seeing a precession over the 83-year cycle. So it's not exactly 83 years, right? Because in 1975, as we had seen, 3 of these 83-year periods later, 249 years later, it's at 0 degrees and 48 arc minutes of Aries. Right. Let's go back. I don't know. Let's go all the way back to like 1564 here. And then we can see that it's like 1.5 Aries. Right. So between 500, I think I said 1564. This is the year 564, the 6th century. Right. I mean, let's go while we're there. Let's go back to time of Christ. Right. And we get a Sun-Jupiter conjunction here at 2 degrees Aries. I'm going to go back in time through Jupiter Sun conjunction, Sun Jupiter conjunctions. And we get Aquarius. So it skipped Pisces, Capricorn, Sag, Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus. And then that time it skipped Aries, right? So in 30 BC, according to these ephemerides, you know, for what they're worth, we had on Venus exaltation, 27 degrees tropical Pisces. And then it skips Aries. So we go Pisces, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius. And now it's going to skip Pisces and go Aries. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, skipping Aquarius, Pisces. So which sign do you think is going to get skipped next? Capricorn? Like we skipped Aries, we skipped Pisces, skipped Aquarius. What happens next time? So we go Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius. Oh, no, Capricorn's there because it's the very last degree, skipping Aquarius twice in a row. So Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Aquarius, skipping Capricorn. Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio got skipped. So skipping Sagittarius was skipped, right? We skipped Aquarius twice. We skipped Capricorn. Then we skipped Scorpio. So this is kind of interesting to consider these. I haven't looked at this before, by the way. This is you and I are just doing this together right now. Here we skipped Gemini, which just happened, by the way. So in the year 32 AD, well, 2025 minus 32 divided by 83, I thought would get a whole number, and it does, right? So we're kind of like 24 of these cycles, of these greater Jupiter cycles since then. 24 times 83 years since 3280. And let's just click these and just dig this pattern, right? Isn't there a way I can bring that up so it's not hiding a part of the chart? Aspect Sun conjunct Jupiter. Okay. No. All right. Anyway, we'll just keep doing this. Taurus, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Gemini. Skip Taurus. Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius. So, I'm not going to say these out loud anymore. You can watch what's happening. Pisces just got skipped. And we have a Sun-Jupiter conjunction very near the Aries point, right? 66 AD. Let's go through cycles again. And now we're at 7 Aries. And watch, you're going to see how that grows to 12 the next time. 17, right? We're like adding 5 days, interestingly. 22. So if we add 5, that's going to go to 27. And if we add 5, that's going to go where? 3 Taurus. And at that time, we skip Aries. All right? So we're starting to see, I'm starting to see, and I believe you are too, this kind of greater cycle. So after Aries gets skipped, then we're back at the Aries point. This is 149 AD. Let's just do like 12 years now. And we'll look at how the Sun-Jupiter point itself moves about 5 degrees every 12 years. So here we're at 7. And so next time we're going to get 12 degrees. Okay. And the next time, 12 years later, we're going to get 17 degrees Aries for the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. And the next time we're going to get 22, 12 years later. Right. And the next time we're going to get, 27. There you go. And the next time we're going to get 3 Taurus. And when we get that 3 Taurus, that's the year when Aries got skipped, right? So Pisces to Taurus to Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces gets skipped, and now we're at Aries again. And an interesting thing, let's do now. So when I go back through these Sun-Jupiter conjunctions from now, we're in this time where we get the 21 Aries. Okay. So we saw it was 1975 where we got the Sun-Jupiter conjunction very close to the world point. And actually, what I think we just found, and I'd really have to go through each of these that happen around every 12 years to make sure, but I think this is the closest that we've gotten to the Aries point in the last 2 millennia at least, if our ephemerides work, right? I'm going to do here is I'm going to go forward 83 years because that's the patterning. And I think we're going to see that the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is even closer to 0 Aries than in 2058. And the answer is absolutely yes, it is. Let's go another 83 years forward. And now, it's interesting. They're 3 arc minutes apart. I don't know why that would be. That's like an ephemeris issue inside the software. But 2141, we're so close to the Aries point. 83 years after that time, in 2224, there we go. 6 arc minutes, or 7 or 8. Okay, well, 83 years after that time, I think this is going to be in Pisces. Nope, we're at 2 arc minutes, 2307. Let's keep going. 83 years after that. 17 arc minutes. That's interesting, right? So it got so close to the Aries point, and then it starts leaving it. Wild. And it starts growing again. I need to see that happen a little bit. It's like blowing my mind. I can't even speak. I need to see that happen a little bit. 83 years later. Yeah, see how it's distancing itself now from the Aries point. Like, why? What's happening? 83 years later. Right? Let's do 5 of those or 8 of those 83-year periods. And then it skips Aries altogether. So this is really fascinating thing happening where not this year, but 1975 plus 83 would be the next one, where we get one of these happenings right at the world point, the 0 Aries point. Let's go forward. It'll be this next one here. Okay, 2058. We're getting closer and closer. Now we'll go 83 years, 20 arc minutes, 83 years. Oops. Six arc minutes, 22, 24. We saw one that was even closer. Two arc minutes. This is the one, 2307. Now, interestingly, I want to cast that chart in Stellarium. So March 21st, 2307. Anybody still here? You into this? You're crazy. Constellations, come on in. You're just crazy enough. All right, so we're going to look at this in Stellarium. I'm going to make sure the Stellarium gets on your screen. So could somebody just reply, please, and tell me that you're able to see me circling the sun here in the twins. This is today, by the way. And then March 21st, 2307. Let's cast that. Did I say 2307? So this should be, if I cast it right, this, yeah, Sun-Jupiter conjunction on the Aries point. By the way, of course, the sun's going to be right on the equator, you know, in this place where the ecliptic and the equator cross, that's 0 Aries. Jupiter's not going to be. Jupiter's nodes are in Cancer and Capricorn. So actually in Aries, Jupiter distances himself furthest from the ecliptic. But Jupiter never gets that far away. At this time, Jupiter's a degree south of the sun. If I supersize them, you know, it looks like a kind of occultation-ish thing. And of course, we're not going to see any of that anyway, because under the beams, right? But here's this 2307 time. Thank you, Olive, for saying, or Mary, for saying you can see the Stellarium. And so that one, March 21st, 2307, we can get in 2390. They're further away. So 2307, this is the one that gets closest. I have never seen this before. And a question I have is that the spawning of the age of Aquarius? Is somehow Jupiter eliciting this? If I take the planets away, you're going to see that at that point, the 0 Aries point is still in the head of the fish. It hasn't yet reached the constellational boundary that the International Astronomical Union uses. A thing I do want to show, though, let's let the world spin here a little bit. Oops. Because we're going to look at the galactic gate on the other side that we've been staring much of this time. And I want to show that galactic center at that time has already crossed 0 Capricorn. Unfortunately, I can't just grab galactic center. I could search Sagittarius A star, which is like black hole at the galactic center here in Stellarium. What? Okay. And so up here, you're going to see in the longitudes 27109. All right. So that means 1 degree Capricorn. if I go years before this time, we want to see when that's exactly 270. That will be the galactic center projection, right? It's a 5-degree line that we're sending up here, equals 0 Capricorn. So many of us now know galactic center at like 27 Sagittarius. Galactic center degree 2, 0 Capricorn in 2226. So another like 3 degrees of precession between now and then. And I want to see how close that is to that. Where are we at? 2307 date of the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, as close to the 0 Aries point as it ever can be. I don't know. Like, we went way back to before Christ and saw it was at like 2 Aries, and it's been kind of slowly precessing, and that in 1975 it's in the 1st degree of Aries, and it's getting closer and closer, and somehow it gets closest in 2307 and then bounces back out. Like, what happens that it starts moving back out? It's like the weirdest thing to me, and I have no idea. I don't even know what to say about it, but this. There are too many mysteries remaining for the world to end now. So let's do it right and keep looking. Eyes to the sky, friends. See you in space. Oh, one thing, please like the video, share it with fellow star seekers, join Constellations. We'd love to see you there. Support the work. You'll find a donate button at GeminiBrett.com. You can book a session with me there. I got a baby to feed, right? Help a guy out. If this helps you out, that's the most important thing. The presence of your present is the greatest gift. Thank you for spending some space time with me, exploring these mysteries of DC, deciphering the star mysteries of DC, and may this time moving forward somehow become a time of peace, so we can prepare for the spawning of the Aquarian age in a good way. See you in space. That's just the wrong button. See ya in space. Should old acquaintance be forgot?